Hey, what's up everybody? Milo here. Today I want to talk to you guys about audio and audio quality in OBS. So the whole goal here, the main objective is to see how we can get the best audio in our broadcast. So often I've tuned in, a lot of people are doing a lot of Facebook live streaming right now and they're using OBS. That's awesome. It's good to see. But sometimes the audio quality is just not at its best. So I'm going to show you a couple of key points on how to get better audio. In fact, right now I'm using a couple of plugins that are built into OBS for me to get better audio so you guys can understand what the heck I'm saying. So let's just jump in, dive right in here. So the first thing that I want to show you, actually the first thing I really want to show you is check your settings for your audio compression. Let's go here for settings. And jump over to the output tab and then jump over to the audio tab. Now make sure that your bit rate is set to 320. By default it may be something else, but you want the highest quality. 320 is where you want to be. That's number one. Number two, now let's jump into the audio settings over here. So here's your overall volume. On the far right you have the cogwheel. Click on that and go to filters. I have added two items here by adding the plus sign. I've added a compressor and I got a limiter. So I'm going to remove those just so you guys can hear the difference. So let's take the limiter out. You probably won't hear too much in the limiter right there, but the compressor, you're going to hear a volume drop quite dramatically. Yeah, so the volume is a lot lower. So I use a compressor. You can use a plugin. I'm bringing the volume up, but I'm also using a limiter to create a ceiling to make sure nothing goes past zero. So what I'm doing is, let's start off with the actual limiter here. So let's add that first, okay? So picture a limiter like you are standing in front of a glass. I like to set this to about -0.5. You're standing in front of this huge thick glass and people are just throwing things at you. You know, they're not throwing them hard enough to get through, right? But there's just so much. And the thicker the glass, the more people can throw things and the more like it never gets past you, but you can see everything, right? Well, that's the way a limiter kind of works. Like you want all that audio to still keep coming your way, but you don't want it to pass and break anything because you have a mess. The same thing with audio. Like if it goes past zero, it just starts to sound like crap. And that's one of the major problems with the people who are people that are broadcasting right now, is they're just kind of running it too hot. So that's going to fix that problem for you. Now, sometimes people are very observant about their levels and they're writing out at 0 on their mixer, right? And so that may come into OBS a little low. So what I like to do is give it some gain. Now, you can use the gain filter to do that. You can add it. And you want to make sure that you add it. The limiter is always going to be the last thing in your chain. So bring that down. That's the way it works. You start processing from the top down. So, and the limiter basically is that glass that I've been explaining to you about. So you can come over here to gain and bring it up to, let's say, about 10 dB, and that's going to sound pretty good. That's going to give us a little more punch. It's going to sound a little louder, but I like to add a little compression. That starts to colorize it a little more. It gives it a little more texture. So let's remove the gain because the compressor also has a gain. So we'll use that one, right? And like I said, let's keep the limiter at the bottom, bring that down, compressor, and I like to compress at about a 2-to-1 compression. Everything else looks good. And now I'm gonna bring up that gain to about, I don't know, let's say about a 14. Now that's gonna keep me sounding pretty hot, pretty good. I'm in the red, but I'm in the red, the good red when you're broadcasting, but I'm not at the very end. So this sounds to me pretty good. Overall, this is a great sound improvement. Okay, so this is version 1. This is what we call a channel strip. Channel strips essentially use compression, use equalization. We don't have EQ right now. And it also uses like imaging, helps create width in your audio. And then at the very end, after it's done all these things, the limiter says, okay, hold up. I'm not gonna let you get any louder, you guys. I'm gonna take what you have, but I'm gonna stop the overall sound quality, the overall sound signal to make sure it never goes past 0. Now I'm going to recreate this, but I'm actually going to use the help of a plugin. So you guys out there who are producers, you make music, you may already have some plugins you want to use. You can use VST plugins in OBS. So, you know, if you're running Ableton, if you're running Pro Tools, well, Pro Tools uses AAX plugins, but what's the other? Logic Pro. Use your VSTs to create a channel strip. You can bring them in here, and you can use a compressor, you can use a maximizer, you can use an EQ, and remember, just remember that you want to basically compress, EQ, and then limit, and your limit's going to be at the very bottom. But I am going to use another VST today, and here's where you bring in VSTs, and I'm going to call this one channel strip. If I can spell it right. And here's the list. And so what I'm going to use today is Ozone 8. So when you buy Ozone, it gives you all these little extra VSTs, but you can use all those VSTs within Ozone all by itself. So let's just go ahead and load that up. So one thing I wanted to mention to you guys is I have a pop filter right now, and that stops me from, or stops you from hearing any of the big pops and implosions that are coming out of my voice at this moment. Here's the Ozone. So it starts you off with an EQ, multi-band compressor, which compresses from low, mid-low, the mids, and then to the highs, and the maximizer. This is default. This is all just kind of set basic. But what I was going to show you here is I can actually remove this pop filter and fix this in the EQ. So if I cut back right around something like that. I like to cut back at about 80 actually. Let's see. Here we go. Something like that. That's going to remove those major low-end pops coming out of my voice. So that's good. We want that. So, you know, that kind of fixes the fact if you're deciding you're going to broadcast something and you're not actually DJing, but you want to have good quality, you don't want to like rattle people's speakers, come over here and you drop this, and that's going to take the plosives, the pop sounds out. But I'm going to go ahead and take that out for now and put my pop filter back because I am going to move on to the next part. This is the coolest part, and this is the most fun out of that I'm going to get out of this tutorial. I hope you feel the same about it. Ozone has a master assistant. You can run anything through this, and it's just so smart. It has its algorithms. It bounces back and forth to kind of figure out how to make sound better. And this is how a digital version of how the radio, you know, analog radio back in the day would do it, because they would have like outboard compressors and limiters and EQ to make voice sound amazing. But we're going to let Ozone tell us how it's going to make my voice what it's going to do to try to make my voice sound amazing. So Master Assistant, click on that. Streaming, you have some options here. We can go into that later. So what it's going to do right now is just really analyze my voice and try and figure out how this thing sound the best it possibly can. So it's going to EQ it. It may use a dynamic multi-band compressor. It's going to use a maximizer. It's going to use a couple of extra plugins in it. Let's see what it does. I don't know. There's a lot more to Ozone than we just saw. So let's see what it does here. I'm going to go ahead and hit accept. So it added an EQ. Oh, it really brought up my voice. So remember how my voice was missing low end? I think this is what happened here. So what I'm going to do is just bring that back down, and I'm still gonna drop the low end just slightly. In fact, let's do something like that. Yeah, there we go. It looks like it decided to also, you can see that it dropped the mid a little bit and brought up the super end highs over here. It looks like the multi-band compressor got turned off and it doesn't want to use it, so let's just keep that there. Now the dynamic EQ actually is a really nice EQ. It decided that it wanted to pull certain areas of my voice and drop that as I'm speaking. So this is kind of like real-time EQ. It's pretty cool how it does that. And you can also see over here at the bottom right, or at the main volume level meter, that it's pretty hot. And let's see what it did to the maximizer. So it decided to say anything at about -20. Let's just boost that level up, and it's capping everything at a negative. It's creating a ceiling at -1. I like it at -0.05. So that's pretty cool. You know, like it sounds a lot better than it did before. But here's another layer of fun. You can add more stuff. You know, it's got exciters, it's got vintage tape, vintage EQ, spectral shaper. I'm gonna add an imager. And the reason I'm doing that is if you look at my voice over here at the level meter, it's exactly the same level both on the left and in the right. It doesn't have a lot of character. So what I'm going to do is push that over here because the channel strip here, like I said, works from left to right. We want to end over here with the maximizer. And we're going to turn on stereo eyes and just kind of push these areas up. And now we're dealing with the low mid area and mid area right here. So instantaneously you can see what it's doing to my voice right here. It's giving it a bit of a wideness to it. I don't sound like I used to. I've got a little bit of and here's how you can, this is scope, you can see what it's doing to my voice and how far it went. If I keep pushing that this way, you can see how much wider it gets, and it just sounds totally different. But this just gives characterization to it. It gives it some personality. So that's it, guys. I used Ozone to create a channel strip, but you can still use the built-in plugins inside of OBS, the compressor, the limiter, the gain. Find something that sounds good. You can record it, play it back, and listen to it before you actually do the broadcast as well. And so if you have any questions, you saw something that like looks like it was like, that probably wasn't right, Milo, let me know. I would love to hear your feedback. This is how I approach things. And I hope you guys learned something new here today. You guys have a great Sunday, and we'll talk again real soon.